Hello everybody. This video is going to be about plugging in coordinates into the following formula: distance formula, midpoint formula, and slope formula. Now I know you've already learned this, but one thing that I've been noticing as I've been looking over your work is that a lot of times you guys are switching coordinates or not paying attention to the double negatives. And I know it can be difficult, so I'd like to give you some techniques that you can use so that you make sure that you have everything lined up correctly and in order. So for the distance formula, it's written right here, and what I'd like you to do is find the distance between these two coordinates, right? So what you can do for any problem like this is set the formula up first before you plug anything in. So I'm writing my square root. I'm going to write my parentheses, the plus, parentheses, and squaring each one. Okay? And also put in the subtraction sign. So I put everything in place except for the coordinates. That's what I'm going to plug in. Okay? So I'm going to plug in my first x, well, let me label them. x1, y1, x2, y2. So I'm going to put in my x2 and y2, so that, x2 and x1, excuse me, -3 minus 1. And then I'm going to put in my y's. -5 minus 4. So since I already have that subtraction sign, now I can see, oh, okay, that's a double negative, so I can change it. Alright, so it's good to put this subtraction sign in there before you start plugging in, so that way you don't get confused about, oh, is it a double negative or not. That way you can actually see. So now I have it set up correctly. Now I can go ahead and simplify what's in my parentheses. Please keep the parentheses the whole time. -3 minus 1 is -4, plus, bring that plus down, -5 plus 4 is -1, squared. Keep the parentheses, please. Now that I'm going to square it, -4 squared is going to be positive. Every time you square a non-negative number, a non-zero number, excuse me, it's always going to be positive. So if you're squaring something and you're getting something negative, you know something went wrong. Okay? So both of these, when you square, if you're using parentheses, you're going to see that you get a positive, and your final answer is a square root of 17. You can't simplify that any further. Okay, so please make sure that you set it up first, then plug in, simplify, keep the square root the whole time. Please do not get rid of the square root unless you are simplifying it to a perfect square. All right, midpoint formula. First thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to set it up. I'm going to put the plus sign in the middle and do the same thing for my y's. Okay, so I already have the whole format there for me. All I have to do is plug in my x values, 4 plus -2. Those are my x values. And then I'm going to plug in my y values. Okay, so now I see when I add a negative, it's not going to become plus, it's going to be a subtraction. If you add a negative, that's still a bad thing, right? So that is going to be like 4 minus 2 over 2. And I can go ahead and simplify that as 14 over 2. Okay? Please don't leave it like this because this is not cute. So 4 minus 2 gives you 2 over 2. And that's 7. Okay? But I can still simplify that. So I'm going to bring that up because I'm running out of space. I can simplify that. This 2 over 2 becomes 1. So my x coordinate is 1. My y coordinate is 7. Okay? So the midpoint between these 2 points is 1, 7. Now for the slope formula, there's a few different ways that you can do this. Okay? Now, one thing that you can do is you can pick one to be your 1 and the other to be your 2. Okay, so since I'm starting with 2's, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with my y, put it on top. Then I'm going to put the bottom down there. Okay? So that's my y2 and x2. Subtraction sign. Now I'm going to do the same thing with my 1's. I'll write my y's. And then I'll put my x at the bottom. And excuse me, this should have been a -7. Sorry. Okay? So now I see, oh, okay, that's a double negative, so that becomes a plus. And that becomes 10 over -6, which is 5 over -3. Okay, so that's one way to set it up. Another way to set it up is you can label each coordinate. And I'll do that over here. So you can label each coordinate, and I'll rewrite it. X1, Y1, X2, Y2. And then you can set the formula up, put your subtraction signs in there already, and then just plug in Y2, Y1, X2, X1. And then you still see that there's going to be a double negative, and that gives you the same thing. Okay, so either method is fine. Either method is fine. It's just very important that you line your numbers up correctly and that you can see when you have a double negative and when you don't. Okay, so that's for the formulas. Now, another thing that's important that you are going to need to know how to do is you need to know the difference between parallel lines and perpendicular. Parallel lines are when their slopes are the same. Okay, so this one is asking us to circle which lines are parallel. So the first thing I need to do is I need to find the slope for each one. This slope we already know is 4. This one we don't know because it hasn't been simplified. So I need to simplify this by distributing. So y is equal to 4x minus 4. Now I know what my slope is because it's in y is equal to mx plus b. So my slope is also 4. Okay. For this one, I need to solve for y. So what I have to do is I need to subtract 4x from both sides. Oops, there we go. And then I get 2y, is equal to negative 4x plus 8. There you can see it. So it's 2y minus 2y is equal to negative 4x plus 8. The last thing to do is to divide everything by 2. And you get y is equal to negative 2x plus 4. Because negative 4 divided by 2 is negative 2. So the slope here is negative 2. Okay? So what that shows us is the lines that are parallel are this line and this line. Why? Because they have the same slope. The other one has a slope of negative 2, so it's not parallel. All right, for perpendicular, the slopes have to be not only opposite signs, but they have to also be reciprocals. So for this one, the slope is 1/2. For this one, the slope is 2. For this one, it's already simplified. The slope is negative 2. So what I can go ahead and do is the ones that aren't written as fractions, I'll write them as fractions so we can see whether we have a reciprocal or not. And you can see that this line and this line are perpendicular. Why? Because they have opposite signs. This one is positive and this one is negative. And they're reciprocals. The 1 is on top and the 2 is on bottom here, whereas the 2 is on top here and the 1's on bottom here. Okay? So that lets you know that they are perpendicular.